Let go and trust God. These are two very important points for our life of faith. Because the more we practice that, the more we are going to experience God's dealings in our life, how He is leading us, and how He is doing wonderful things even today. We see that especially in the life of Abraham, but also with many other believers, both in the Bible and also in church history. Solomon writes in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct thy path." Take Simon Peter, for instance. The Lord Jesus gave him the task to draw out into the deep and to let the nets down for a draw. And Peter, who was an experienced fisherman, when he heard these words, it didn't make any sense to him. And he had really to let go and not to lean up on his own understanding, but simply to trust the words of his Lord and Master. And because he did that, he saw the glory of God and he experienced the wonderful dealings of God in his life. And that brought him a huge step forward in his life of faith. Now, many times our intelligence is hindering us to obey the Lord because we say, oh, that doesn't make sense to me, or we cannot see the end of the way or whatsoever. But God is simply asking us to trust Him blindly. He gets us out of our comfort zone and He wants us to really trust Him, to let go and to put our trust in Him alone. Now, later on, when the Lord Jesus told him, "Come," and Peter, he left the boat, he again had to let go and to leave human security behind. And as soon as he put his foot up on the water, he experienced the faithfulness of God and how the Lord Jesus, He carried him on the waters when Peter had his eyes fixed up on his Master. Now, sometimes God is calling us to do steps of faith that are connected with uncertainties, where we cannot really say, where will it go? Where will it lead to? We cannot justify ourselves before others. We simply have to obey the Lord. And this is something that is precious to the Lord, because faith that trusts in Him, that honors Him, is precious in His eyes. Now, take Ananias in Acts chapter 9. The Lord Jesus gives him the task to visit Saul of Tarsus. And when Ananias gets that command, he is very afraid because he thinks this man, he persecuted the Christians. And he could not imagine that there had been a change with this man. But because he let go and he trusted the words of his Lord and Master, he saw what the grace of God is able to do in the life of a man. And he was a wonderful tool that helped the Apostle Paul at the beginning of his life of faith. But again, he had to let go and to trust God. Now let us turn to Abraham. At least 3 times Abraham had to let go and to trust God, and each time he experienced the faithfulness of God and how God is dealing with those who trust Him. Now, first of all, God called him when he was still in Mesopotamia, and God told him, leave your parents, leave your place and come into the land that I will show you. And for Abraham, that really meant to let go things and to leave things behind, and he even didn't know the end of the journey. But someone said once, it is not important to know the end of the journey, it is simply important to know the one who leads us. And that's really the main thing that counts. And Abraham, he left his place not knowing whither he went. Now, what was the reward of God? First of all, God revealed Himself to Abraham on his journey, and He led him step by step. And you see, that's the same thing that will happen in our lives when we trust the Lord. When He is calling us to something where we cannot see the end of the journey, we may simply trust Him that He will lead us step by step, and we are going to see the glory of God. Now, another example is in Genesis chapter 13. There we find Abraham and Lot. They had been in Egypt for some time, and from there they brought a lot of cattle, and because of that there had been a strife between the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Abraham. Now, what was Abraham's reaction to that? He said, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdmen, for we are brethren. Now, that was already a very good mindset that Abraham showed here. He wanted to avoid strife. And now what he says, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. And if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. Now Abraham, he leaves the choice to Lot. And he let go. And in his heart, I'm convinced he trusted the Lord, that the Lord would give him what is good in his sight. And you see, someone once said, God will give his very best to those who leave the choice to him. And that's exactly what Abraham experienced. Because God's reaction later on, after Lot has chosen his land, is this. God said to Abraham, lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward, for all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. So God took care of his servant because Abraham was willing to sacrifice his right and to go the lower way. And you see, for us, this has a very practical lesson. If there is strife among believers and we insist on our rights, we will not move forward by faith. But if we are willing to sacrifice our right because we want to show the mind of Christ and we want to follow him, God will reward this in one way or another. We can be sure one day God is going to reward this if you are willing to sacrifice your right to have peace and to pursue peace for the benefit of relationships and for the glory of God. God will reward this. Now in Genesis chapter 22, we again find Abraham who had to let go and to trust God. And there God is talking to him and says, Abraham, take now your son, your only son, whom you love, as Isaac, and offer him to me as a sacrifice. And Abraham really was willing to let go and to trust God. He immediately obeyed the Lord. And he went to that place and he was really fully willing to let go completely. He put his son on the altar. And there he experienced God like never ever before. Because there he experienced how God gave him back his son as in resurrection. It was really like as he had really offered him as a sacrifice. And he gave this place the name, the Lord will provide. So Abraham learned the God of resurrection, and he learned that God will provide everything that is necessary because he was willing to sacrifice all for him. And then God revealed himself to Abraham again, and he said, because you have done this, and you have not foreheld your only son, but you were willing to sacrifice him, I will bless you richly and your descendants. So God gave a fresh revelation of himself, and he promised him even greater blessing. So there is great reward connected to letting go and trusting God. And even if God may probably ask you to let go something, to leave something behind, probably something that is precious to you, then trust him, trust the Lord. He knows best what is good for you. And the more you let go and trust God, you are going to experience the glory of God in your personal life.